Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and today is the finale of our top 100 favorite board games of all time. We are counting them down from 10 to 1, so let's go.
My number 10 is Forest Shuffle, and Forest Shuffle is a nature-themed tableau builder, and you're building these little ecosystems around trees. And how you do that is you're tucking the cards like to the left, right, top, and bottom. And you're usually focusing on a few different strategies because the cards all score in different ways. So you might be trying to get a whole bunch of wolves and then you'll want a whole bunch of deer, or maybe like a ton of birds. But whilst you're trying to get the cards you're looking for, you're also keeping an eye on your opponents, because one of the key things is anytime you want to play a card, you have to pay for that card with cards from your hand, and those cards become available in the meadow. So there's this constant tension of not wanting to give up some cards from your hand that you might want to play later, but also not wanting to give up cards that you know your opponents are going to want.
It's kind of like hate keeping instead of hate drafting.
Yeah, and you can time it just right where you're putting it in the meadow where it's full and then the whole thing gets cleared out. But it is my number 10.
My number 10 is Kanban, and specifically still Kanban Driver's Edition. I know EV looks so beautiful, but it just looks a bit too much like an Apple store for me, and I like the older, more colorful version. So if you can find it cheap, pick it up, it's great. But Kanban is all about running a super efficient automobile factory and about impressing Sandra, who is moving around the factory from spot to spot. And this is one of my favorite mechanics in this game. But it's Vitel Lacerda, so it's got all of these just really wonderfully integrated systems, and you're getting blueprints on how to build cards, you're getting bits, you're building the cards, you're testing the cars as you're racing them around the tracks, you're doing goals. While you do this, Sandra is slowly moving from place to place as she gets to the final bit and then judges you. And as she moves too, she takes up spots, and it's just such a clever system of this thing that almost feels like a third player bot kind of thing, but is for everyone. And there's a nice Sandra and a mean Sandra. Jess has never let me play with mean Sandra.
No, she sounds too mean.
It is right in her name, but I'm so keen to do it. But even without mean Sandra, Kanban is my number 10.
My number 9 is Horrified, which definitely falls into the comfort game category. We have played this a ton of times, and it's nice that we have played like all of the different versions as well. So in Horrified, you are cooperatively trying to fight different monsters, and how you're doing that remains consistent across the different games. You've got to pick up items, and then you've got to deposit those items in different ways to defeat the monsters. And that's what makes it interesting, is each of the monsters have to be defeated in different ways. And so in terms of the different editions, that's where they're able to like tweak those gears and make it more complex or just slightly different. I am going to choose the original one, the Universal Monsters, and that's because leading up to getting the game, Shawn made me watch all of the Universal.
I treated you
Yes.
to the opportunity of watching, especially Bride of Frankenstein. That movie's tremendous.
Yeah, I was just really happy to watch those old movies, and they did a really good job of integrating all the different characters and the monsters into this shared world. And Horrified is my number 9.
My number 9 is Planet Unknown, and Planet Unknown has just become one of my go-to games. It's like a game in our collection that I just want to show off to everybody, and part of that is that it looks really pretty, but it looks really pretty in this clever way that like board game fans see it and they see that Lazy Susan and it's just like, why didn't someone think of this before? What a terrific way for everyone to play at once, because what you do, you spin around that Lazy Susan if it's your turn, and then you choose one of the 2 tiles in front of you, but everyone else gets to choose one of the 2 tiles in front of them at the same time. So you're always playing, which I really like. Also, it's got this awesome asymmetry with a ton of planets, a ton of different corporations, And everything that you do is like a dopamine hit. Like you put down those tiles and then you bump up those tracks. And every time you move up a track, you're getting something and that's leading to another thing. And it's so instantly fun. It's so likable. It's so cool looking. And it is my number 9.
My number 8 is Anachrony.
My number 8 is Anachrony.
Oh, what?
Yes, this is our first. This is our first, and I bet only crossover. It took us 92 games to get here. All right, so let's do it together.
My number 8 is Anachrony.
And okay, that's enough.
And in Anachrony, it takes place in a post-apocalyptic world before another apocalypse.
Yeah, it's right between apocalypses.
Yeah,
That's a tough time to live.
You are trying to accomplish different goals, and it'll be dependent which faction you are before you need to then evacuate. And because the world is like post-apocalyptic, anytime you need to go to the surface, you have to go visit it in an exosuit. And we upgraded and we got the coolest exosuit package.
When I first bought this game, I just got the base game because I didn't know if I'd like it. And like halfway through, I think, I was ordering the mech suits because I almost bought them right away. And they make such a huge
totally
difference.
Worth it.
I rarely like those extras in board games, but this one, 100% worth it.
And I think this was the first kind of heavier worker placement game that I had played. And I think that's what I really liked about it. It was a step up from some of the other worker placement games, but just the right amount that I was able to feel clever when I was able to pull things off, but it was still all accomplishable.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about this game is it has such a smooth rule set, like for how heavy it is, for how integrated all of the bits are. It's actually not that hard to learn. It's not like the easiest game, but it's not as hard as you would think it would be to learn. And once you've learned it, like we barely ever look back at the rules. One thing I will say though is we bought a ton of expansions for this, and I actually kind of prefer it without any of them. Like we'll mix them in here and there, and it's nice to have one in every now and then. But honestly, I would just go with the base game for this until you've really played through that, because I think that base game so solid.
And the base game even comes with a few adjustments because there's like the A side and B sides. There's also the where you are able to like time travel of like going back for resources. There's different sides for that as well. So just the base game with the exosuits, I think is the way to go.
100% those exosuits, and that is
our number 8. My number 7 is Between Two Castles. And Between Two Castles is a tile placement game where you are building a really cool looking castle. And there are a couple different ways to play. So specifically, I really like the 2-player way, which is essentially exclusively how we've played it.
And no one plays it that way, but it really is fun.
It works so well as a 2-player game, and how it works is you have your stack of tiles and you get to pick one that you want to add to your castle, and then you choose one for your opponent. And so you want to give them what they don't want. You want it to not be helpful. And Shawn is always very annoying because no matter what I give him, he always looks at it and says, "Ooh, thank you."
She gives me such good tiles.
And I love that decision of having to use whatever your opponent gives you as well and make the most of it. And it is one that we have played so many times. It's one of our go-to, like late in the evening, one final game games, and it is my number 7.
My number 7 is Ultimate Railroads. And I was talking earlier about Planet Unknown being this game where you're doing different stuff and you're bumping different tracks. This does kind of that same thing, but at a much kind of heavier, thinkier level. And so in Ultimate Railroads, you're building trains, but it is at the most abstracted possible way. This, like, you would not know this was trains unless it was in the title. But that doesn't matter because it's super fun. And so you're building your trains by putting dudes out on this board, and it's very competitive worker placement where all of those spots are important. Some of them are getting you trains that power your rails. Some of them are moving your rails along these little tracks. And moving along those tracks gets bonuses. It gets these ideas that do really cool, big kind of game-breaking things. And we've got 4 different boards. So Ultimate Railroads has 4 of the different expansions all mushed together, and each one of those boards does its own thing. And Germany's probably my favorite because you can mix and match how your trains look and where those bonuses fall, but all 4 of them are great. And this game, just how it builds up too, that you do like so little and then you do so much in that last turn. That last turn's like 120 points. You feel like a genius. I really love this game, and it is my number 7.
My number 6 is Terraforming Mars. And Terraforming Mars, I love the theme of using science to terraform planets. And this leans way into it. I think I say this every time I talk about it, but it was inspired by a book called The Red Planet, which I have read and I really enjoy.
She doesn't just say it on the videos every time. Every time we play this game, I hear about The Red Planet, which I gotta read.
You do have to read it, then I'll stop talking about it. You are building your engine by playing different cards, and you might be making a whole lot of heat or putting down a whole bunch of plants, and you're trying to synergize your cards and usually like focus on a couple of different pathways. And it's a race too, because together you're all terraforming the planet, and the game ends when all of the terraforming has happened.
I love that it's together but competitively.
Very competitively. You are competitive corporations, and I love that we have the 3D printed one because at the end you actually have like this little forest and ocean, and the planet has gone from a red planet to this beautiful, lovely planet, and it is my number 6.
My number 6 is Village. And Village was love at first play. We played this in like a seaside town in a little game shop when we were waiting for a train, and I was just immediately blown away. It took you a little while to fall in love with it, but I was like, this game is terrific. And part of that is I love the theme so much. So in Village, you got a family and you're putting them out on spaces, you're gaining new family members and stuff. But as you do stuff, everything you do costs time. And as soon as your time goes around past midnight, somebody dies. And that means that they go into like the memory of the town. And that's a big part of this game is you want people to die, but like at the right time, when they're in the right place and you can put them in the right section of that book. And it's got this amazing action selection mechanism as well, where they've got all these cubes out on the board and you choose one of the cubes to take off to do that action. But you also get that cube, which helps you pay for other stuff. So you've got all these cool integrated decisions, and you're making stuff, selling it to the market, you're traveling around and visiting different towns. There's just all sorts of neat bits to it, and there's even more bits because we've got the big box, and the big box is, I love a big box, but the big box here is 100% the way to go. Because you get 3 different expansions, maybe even 4. You get a whole bunch of different expansions, and they all do cool different things. We always play with one of them because the game just feels so much different, and that is my number 6.
My number 5 is Ark Nova. And I love the theme. I have a zoology background, and you are running a conservation zoo in Ark Nova. So you are trying to have habitats for your animals that you're putting in, but then eventually releasing those animals. And Ark Nova is really like a Frankenstein game. It combines so many different mechanics from different games that I really like. A lot of people compare it to Terraforming Mars because of the like engine building, and I really like Terraforming Mars. But I also really like how the end of the game is triggered. And I saw that before in Rajas of the Ganges, where it's these 2 separate tracks, and it's when they cross over. And that means that you can trigger the end of the game either by going like really high on one or the other, or kind of equally on both, and keeping an eye on where your opponent is for when that end game is triggered. And how you do your actions is something I've seen in Civilization New Dawn, where you have this track, and as you don't use actions, they progress further and get even stronger. So you really want to try and use them when they're at the top, but you sometimes just need to do a lesser action because that's what you need to do then. And I think it just integrates all of these mechanics so seamlessly, and it is my number 5.
My number 5 is A Feast for Odin, and A Feast for Odin is famous for having just the most worker spots. There's probably a game with more worker spots, but I haven't played it. This has got oodles of them, and you are a bunch of Vikings. you're doing a bunch of Viking things. So you're visiting different islands, you're building boats, you're hunting, you're stealing stuff from faraway places, and what you're trying to do within the game is fill up these boards. So you start with a whole bunch of negative points, and you've got to cover all those negative points with the stuff that you make or you steal or you hunt or whatever, however it is that you get it, by covering up that board. But where this game's really fun is when you go and get those islands and you go and get those different longhouses and you build this really cool engine. Because our first times playing this, we just got stressed. We were like, you got to cover up these points right away, and it felt so hard and it felt not very fun at all. We actually almost sold this game. And we had it in like our closet of maybe we sell it. And I thought, no, we'll pull it out again. I saw a review, someone loved it, and it kind of won me over. And so we played it again by going to those islands first, and oh boy, the difference that made. And you make these satisfying engines that you're getting all this stuff every turn, and then in that last turn, you just get a ton of stuff. You cover up all those minuses. You feel like a genius. And I love this game. Now, this is the biggest turnaround, I think, of any game for me that we have owned. And it is my number 5.
My number 4 is Cascadia, and it combines two things I really like. I love nature-themed games, and I love tile placement games. And this is what you're doing. You are building the Cascadia region. And I love the puzzle, because on your turn, you have to pick a landscape tile and an animal that goes with it, and then put that on your board. But you're trying to connect your landscapes to make those as big as possible, whilst also placing your animals depending on what type of animal it is and how they score. And that combination leads to, it's a really simple at the surface puzzle, but can lead to some really interesting decisions of what pair you take and how you build your landscape, and whether you like, oh, I'll just keep this area small because I'd rather be able to put this animal out. And it also is the area where I'm from, so I think that helps too. And Cascadia is my number 4.
My number 4 is Great Western Trail New Zealand, and I really liked the original Great Western Trail, especially with the expansion, and I liked Argentina, but I think Great Western Trail New Zealand is like perfecting that system. Great Western Trail New Zealand just does every single thing right. And so a few of the things that I love the little ship track. Instead of the trains, they've taken kind of the expansion from the first game, but they've tightened it up a little bit more, made it a little bit more thematic. I love the sheep because they're adorable. And I love the deck building because it always kind of felt like it was supposed to be a deck builder. But New Zealand really makes it a deck builder where you're actually getting these cool cards that do a power and then get immediately discarded, but then you get another card right away. And so it gives you really different ways to play. It also makes the different kinds of workers, I feel like, a lot stronger. In this one, I feel like you really can go down all 4 of those different paths. Like everything in this is viable. It's a bigger sandbox, and I feel like it's Alexander Pfister, who's like the master of the rondel, kind of perfecting his rondel system. This is, I think, by far his best game, and it is my number 4.
My number 3 is Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is a worker placement and deck building game. And you are these archaeologists. So one of the key things you're trying to do is spend resources to go up this research track. And the first time you play this, it feels impossible because there are a ton of things that you need to be able to research all the way to the top. And you only have 2 workers and the game's only 5 rounds. So you're only able to visit 10 spots in total, but you're able to figure out ways of being able to get different resources because you're able to use coins to buy cards. There's also another type of card you can get. You can visit these sites and fight monsters, and fighting monsters will get you things, and it will clear up these stronger worker placement actions. So I love games that you're really trying to stretch out what you can do and look for, like, I've got one compass left. Is there anything I can do that might let me do a few other things? And we got the expansion that lets us play cooperatively. So that's been really fun because it's this whole story and campaign. So every time you play a scenario, it's completely different, introduces different challenges, and it's been great to try and tackle it together. And it is my number 3.
My number 3 is Sea Salt and Paper. And Sea Salt and Paper is the game that we probably play the most. We have this with us everywhere. We're always playing this game. We're introducing it to everybody. And I have enjoyed this game every time I have ever played it. It's just such a fun, simple set collection game, but it does it perfectly. This is my absolute favorite card game. And all you're doing, you got 2 cards down, you either take one of those cards or you take 2 cards off the top and you keep one. And you're trying to make all these different sets, and as you play it more and more, there becomes this like cool meta game where there's like people and sharks, and if you get those together, you can steal cards. So as soon as someone gets a person, it becomes this like stressful thing of like, will they get a shark? Or even you put down a card that's like a really good card, and then it's like, oh, do they have a mermaid? Because a big part of this game is when you want to end the round. So once you've got 7 or more points, you can decide to end the round. You can either end it right now and everyone counts out their score, or you can give everyone else one more chance to try to beat you. You can kind of dare them to try and beat your score. And if they fail, they only score their highest matching colored cards, whereas you score all of your points plus your highest matching color cards. And so you can get way ahead of them because this is a race for points. And the expansion, even though it's only like 8 cards, adds like a whole other layer to this game too. And this is number 3 because this is probably my board gaming moment of the last year when I got a mermaid victory. I love games where you can get like a sneaky little victory that is going to be like once or twice in a lifetime. And in this, if you get 4 mermaids, you just automatically win. Game is over. And I got one come from way behind mermaid victory that was like the crowning achievement of my board game life. And that has pushed this way up the charts. I adore this game. And it is my number 3.
My number 2 is Everdell, and this was a really difficult choice because I have always had it at the number 1 position.
I kind of felt like it was your forever number 1.
And the reason for that is because it was the game that pushed me into the deep end of board gaming. I love the components, I love how it looks, but also I just really like the mechanics. I enjoy the tableau building and how you have to try and make do with what seems like very few resources, because every worker spot you're going to only gets you like 1, 2, maybe 3 things, and you're trying to spend those for more cards. But those cards create a little bit of an engine. They give you bonuses with the seasons, or they might give you discounts for certain cards. So being able to figure out which ones you want to put into your tableau, because once you've played a while, those 15 spots are gonna fill up pretty quickly, is quite an interesting challenge. And it's made even better by adding in the expansion. So we got the huge like Everdell big box, which comes with a lot. And my favorite way to play is using the asymmetric player powers from Belfair and New Leaf, which is one of the newer expansions, because New Leaf just lets you do more. You're able to spend a lot of your extra resources and stuff you end up with at the end for more points. You're able to get more cards, and everything just feels so rewarding. We often talk about getting a dopamine hit in board games, and I really feel like this does that so well, because when you can get the right character that can go in the right home,
I love that mechanic.
It's so rewarding, and New Leaf gives you more flexibility for that because it lets you put characters in that are less specific to each home. And I just love building my little animal town that is this beautiful village at the end, and Everdell is my number 2.
My number 2 is Gaia Project, which was last year's number 1. So both of our number 1s got bumped down just 1 notch this year, but I still love Gaia Project. And Gaia Project is Terra Mystica 2.0. Gaia Project takes that system and puts it into space it makes it just a way better game for 2 players. And I really love the engine building in this. We've been talking about games where you have very few resources and you're stretching them out, and we both obviously love when that's in a game. And for me, Gaia Project does that the very best. And there's all these just clever different ways you can go. So you can move up these tracks, and those get you all different kinds of bonuses. And all of those different tracks are like totally different focuses. You can only do kind of 2 or 3 in a game, so you really have to pick and choose. You also have all these different really asymmetric races that have just crazy different powers. And you're going around to these planets, you're making federations, you've got different goals that you've got each game, you've got different goals that you've got each round. You've got ways that you can trade different things. You've only got like 3 different kinds of resources, but trading those resources for different resources, putting out buildings, it's so much fun and it's so unbelievably tight. And this is also a tremendous solo game. This is the first time I played a game from Atoma Factory, who do all the Stonemaier games. I still think this is probably their best solo mode that they've made, because it also has the asymmetric races still. If you just want a solo game that's like a heavy Euro game, this is my #1 recommendation, but also tremendous at 2 players, tremendous at more players. Play it at any number and it's so great. And I just want to keep on playing it because there's still, for how many times we've played it, I feel like there's still races that I've like only played once or I've barely even touched yet. And all of those experiences are so different. You want to experience all of them. And this is my #2.
My #1 is Dorfromantik, and what made me decide that it was #1 is on our birthday, we get to pick which games we want to play, and this was the one that I picked with a bullet. It has become my go-to comfort game. If there's ever a time when I'm feeling like, oh, I want to be cheered up and I want to play a board game, this is the game I choose. I love that it is a cozy, cooperative tile placement game. You are building your little village, but you're still having to accomplish different tasks and get various goals. So it still feels rewarding because you are trying to keep getting higher scores and achieve different tasks. So it feels like there's a purpose behind it, which is how I like to have fun. I like to have fun when there is a purpose behind it.
Fun with rules. That's board games.
Well, exactly. And this comfort of just working together to build your village, achieve things, unlock different things because it's a campaign. So you're able to like go up different tracks, bring out different tiles, and that's rewarding as well. And we are on the 2nd time playing through. And so we're like choosing a different route that we're going up. And we still haven't reached the highest title that you can get on the score sheet. So we're still working towards that, but it is my #1.
My #1 is Dune Imperium / Uprising. And I will say, if you are buying this game for the first time, if you don't have this game, buy Uprising. It's the better base game. But my favorite way to play this still is the original Dune Imperium with both of the expansions. I just feel like that it works perfectly. I do miss out having the sandworms and some of those things, but Dune Imperium and those 2 expansions is my absolute favorite way to play this game. And Dune does such a good job of capturing the feeling of Dune because everything is so unbelievably tight and so sparse. Like, I love the look of the board, that it's mostly desert and that you're just not getting that much from stuff. I love that this whole thing is just a race to 10 points and that every single point is such a fight, and you're losing some of those points too, because a lot of those points you get from moving up this politics track, which is also so thematic, but people can take them back from you when they get above you. You can get points as well from these super strong sandworm cards, and you're mostly gaining points from battles. But those battles themselves are also real wars of attrition, because every time you lose all of those troops that you commit to the battle. So sometimes you just strategically hold back and then the next time hop in when nobody's got anything. But those expansions as well, they add so much. They just add so many little things. The first one gives you access to these special powers that you can buy with spice, which makes spice even more useful. And the second one gives you this track that you're moving up, and it gives you access to these other cards. And if I can choose any game at all to play, it is probably always going to be Dune Imperium plus those 2 expansions. It just feels like the perfect Dune experience to me, and it is my number 1. And that is it. That is all the way down to number 1. Thank you so much for being here. Whether you've been following all the way from 100 or if you just started at this one, it is always so much fun for us to look back into what do we like right now, to really think about that, to reorder things. I think board gamers just love making lists, and we love making this every year.
And it was so hard, especially the list of the final 10. But thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments what your favorite games are. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.